What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the all-new 2020 Subaru Outback XT Touring. Huge thanks to Subaru for providing me with the all-new Outback here to review for you guys today. So about the 2020 Outback, well, it is completely new, but it looks very familiar. And supposedly Subaru had polled their current owners and they said they didn't want things to change a whole lot. So that's why the styling you see here is very evolutionary in a small way and doesn't divert from the proven successful formula of the look of the current Outback. And so it still is a little bit sharper up front here. I do like these LED daytime running lights, and you have a little bit of a bolder grille than before. Also, the front bumper is a little more aggressive. So, I mean, there are some changes, but you really have to know Outbacks to be able to spot the differences, I think. And it is really impressive too, though, how, this vehicle has 8.7 inches of ground clearance. And even though this is essentially a wagon version of the Legacy in many ways, that extra ground clearance and the chunkier cladding on the sides and stuff here really gives it a much bigger appearance and really makes it feel like such a bigger vehicle, and it actually does feel like it's an SUV. Other things here, I really like this chrome window trim you have and how it kind of flows into the side view mirror here. It's a nice little upscale touch in my opinion. It nicely stands out. Otherwise, out back, I think, is where you see the biggest changes here with this vehicle. You have those smokier tail lamps than what you had on previous Outbacks, and just a little bit of a sharper, more chiseled look out back there as well. And the whole vehicle itself is 0.6 inches wider. It's also 1.4 inches longer. Most of that length goes to the rear seat area. So it is a little bit of a more stretched out, larger Outback than it was before as well. And so I think overall it still is a very good but conservative look. All right, so start them go for a drive. The Outback here has the new Subaru key, which is really nice. I love the metal finishes you have on the sides of it. A little bit of a thicker key, but not too bad. And overall, I really like it. But yeah, it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So you just hit the start button to start it up. And if you're curious to hear the interior thoughts on this vehicle, my wife and I did a combined review, a separate video. You can go watch that. I'll include a link above. And then you can come back here and watch this one for the driving impressions. All right, so setting off in the 2020 Subaru Outback. So the first thing I think I'm noticing is just how high you sit up here in the Outback. I just got out of a week of driving the Legacy, and this, you really feel like you're up in an SUV, a much higher seating position, thanks mostly to that higher ground clearance. So that gives you an excellent view of the road, nice thin A-pillars, huge windows, and view out of the back is also great too. Other things you notice here as we're accelerating a little bit is that you have a fairly disconnected throttle response. This is something I also mentioned in the Legacy, where it almost feels like you're putting your foot on a slightly deflated balloon that is then connected to the gas pedal. And so it's hard to be precise. And then this one being the turbo, the Legacy I reviewed was a non-turbo. The turbo here also is a little peaky. So, the CVT will let the engine rev up, and then that spools up the turbo, and then the turbo kicks in. And so you have all these different dimensions of reactions going on, I guess. And so it a little bit of a confused experience sometimes. But one thing that is very clear is just how smooth the ride is here in the Outback. I mean, it is so comfortable. It is really one of the most soft, comfortable rides I've experienced all of 2019 here. I'm filming this at the end of 2019, and it is really stands out. I mean, and combined with these really nice soft seats, I mean, it is a very, very comfortable ride. Also very quiet and refined. You don't really hear much of what's going on outside. So they really did a good job with this new Subaru Global platform of really making everything much more refined than it used to be. Other things to note here, brakes have a nice, good response to them. There's just a little bit of tip in, and then they really start braking very early on the pedal there. So that's a really reassuring feeling. Another thing that's nice is you have nice light steering here in the Outback. Very appropriate for a vehicle like this, and I find it to be pretty relaxing having nice light steering, but it is very accurate as well. So it's not like it's vague or anything like that. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see about the acceleration. And here we go. There it is. Still takes the turbo a second to kick in. Then it really pulls strong once it gets up and starts moving. Well, so yeah, it's got this 2.4 liter flat 4 turbo engine, same one that you have in the Subaru Ascent, and does the same exact power, 260 horsepower, 277 pound-feet of torque, and it'll get this thing moving 0 to 60 in 6.1 seconds is what Motor Trend got. I think other outlets have seen something in the mid 6-second range, but a good amount of power and really moves this thing nicely. I will say though that an interesting thing I'm noticing is that the CVT, since there's always a little bit of a delay where the CVT kind of freewheels for the first second or two before it actually starts to, you know, give you that forward momentum a lot stronger. And so from a low speed, you don't really feel like it's that much punchier than the non-turbo version. So it's not like other turbo motors in other vehicles where you have lots of low-end punch. There isn't much low-end torque here in this. It still has to, you know, give me 4,000 RPMs and then I feel the front end lift up and I really feel this thing start to haul. But it doesn't have as much that low end punch, which is what you're kind of wanting in a vehicle like this. And I honestly think the way it was calibrated in the Subaru Ascent, it seemed to have a little bit more guts down low than this does, which is strange because it should be a very similar setup since you're doing the same exact power output and stuff. But just one little thing I'm noticing. The Outback does weigh a little bit more than the Legacy. It was hard to nail down an exact number. I think it's roughly about 100 pounds heavier than a Legacy when you're comparing them with equal trims and all that kind of stuff. But for an Outback XT like this one, the curb weight is around 3,937 pounds. So, you know, getting close to 4,000 pounds there. So it's, you know, I think some of that comes down to the turbo stuff, you know, weighing a little bit extra, and of course you have a little bit more bulk here with the Outback over the Legacy. But you know, we're coming up some corners here, and let's see how this vehicle handles. It only has 225 wide all-season tires, pretty tall sidewalls. Okay, so it has a little bit of lean initially, and that's because it's got this, you know, soft, comfortable ride as a priority. But it's fairly flat and competent. It's been a little while since I've driven one of the older Outbacks, but this definitely feels a lot more buttoned down, a lot less sway, but it's still, I can feel it wanting to push. So it does have torque vectoring going on, which is nice, but I don't really feel that a whole lot, and it just feels like there's not a ton of grip. And whenever I'm turning the wheel, it feels like I have to turn the wheel a lot. It's not very quick steering. Now in a vehicle like this, especially SUVs, you usually have a little bit of a slower steering ratio. It feels a little lazy in corners because I'm really having to saw away at the wheel here in order to get it to turn in. It doesn't feel like it's eager to turn in. It doesn't feel like it really wants to dive into corners, and that was something back with the older Outback XT, actually, back the last time they had the XT models, is those felt a little sportier. And I noticed this with the Legacy as well, where, you know, they have gone more towards a comfort focus, and that's totally fine. The type of people that are buying these vehicles, even the XT versions, you know, are most likely going to be non-enthusiasts who don't want, you know, they would rather have a softer ride than have amazing sharp handling, and that's okay. It just means this isn't as fun to go around corners in as maybe like an old Outback XT. But again, that was 10 years ago. They were much lighter, simpler vehicles back then than they are these days, so probably an unfair comparison. And as long as comfort is your focus, you know, having the turbo motor is great. You know, I think it's going to be a much more fuel efficient engine than the old 3.6 liter flat six that they used to have as their top engine option, and I think that's obviously one of the main reasons why they switched to this as well. It gives you a little bit of that turbo fun, you know. Even I think what you really notice is at higher speeds. So, you know, we're kind of cruising here at about 40 miles an hour, and that turbo really kicks this thing up and gets you some really nice acceleration. And so I'm pretty impressed with the mid-range punch in this vehicle, but it's, again, hooked up to this CVT transmission, and it just gives you a disconnect because I got to push the gas down like halfway before I get a response sometimes. And then with this turbo motor again, you got to wait for the turbo to spool up and then go. So there's, like I said earlier, there's all kinds of disconnect, and so you know, putting your foot down and then getting a response is always a few second process. It's not as immediate, and that also takes away from some of the sportiness that I personally was wishing the XT version had. And unfortunately, it just seems to be, you know, a more powerful engine option for those who want the top trims of the Outback, but not quite as sporty whenever you're going down a back road. Thankfully, you do have a manual mode and paddle shifters here, so we can try that out a little bit. and it's very responsive. Subaru does a really good job with their CVTs of actually holding onto that ratio and holding gears, and it'll actually simulate an 8-speed automatic transmission with these paddles if you do want to play around with that. And honestly, it is quick enough with its responses that I think if you are in a sporty mood and you want to, you know, be a little bit more aggressive with your driving, then, you know, first gear starting, yeah, then it takes off. So that's honestly the way to launch this thing. If you want to really have none of that interruption of the CVT nonsense, just paddle shift it. It's quick enough, and it's a lot of fun actually, especially with this turbo motor. So it holds ratios whenever you're downshifting, because it thinks you're trying to slow the vehicle down. But whenever you have upshifted, like I'm in 4th simulated gear right now, and it still jumps between like 2,000 RPM and 3,000 RPM. So it's not holding that ratio there, and it's starting to have a mind of its own. So for a little bit there, it will be obedient to your commands, but if you're not constantly moving these paddles around, it still is going to have a mind of its own, unfortunately. This time I'm actually turned. See how well it puts the power down? Yeah, it wanted to push a little bit, so it does have a lot of understeer built in, and so this is a great vehicle whenever you're driving in a relaxed manner, whenever you're driving it maybe 7/10 or less is its comfort zone. You start pushing it more than that if you're in a hurry, or if you're, you know, trying to drive with some passion. That's where this kind of you know, lets me down a little bit still. The name of the game here is comfort. Most people aren't bombing down back roads in their Outback. You know, they're just using them to commute in, go on adventures in, haul the family around, all those types of things. This is going to do very, very well. And so clearly, you know, they have their priorities right. This is going to be really good for that kind of stuff. But thanks to Subaru, I will have this vehicle for an entire week. And so I'm going to be driving around all week here and experiencing that EyeSight system, which I mentioned in the Legacy, if you watched my Legacy review. That is the driver safety tech in this vehicle, is one of the more intrusive ones. But I'm going to be driving this vehicle around all week, and I'll come back and give you guys my final real-world fuel economy, as well as my thoughts on this safety system and anything else I notice here in my week of driving. Alright, so I've been driving the 2020 Outback for a week now, and I've put about 116 miles on it here in my week of driving. So I alluded to right before I you know, stopped filming the first part of the video about this EyeSight safety tech. And it is a comprehensive list of safety features, and that's kind of, you know, what is reassuring, what people like to see, especially here in a fully loaded model like this touring trim that I'm in. So you have the blind spot monitoring. It also has the reverse cross traffic detection, as well as automatic reverse braking. Those are all nice features. You know, didn't have any issues with any of that stuff during my week. All the basic stuff, you know, they do very well. It's just whenever Subaru took this leap up to doing more advanced driver assistance stuff than what some of the competition offers, it's where it starts to get a little glitchy. And so the main issue that I have is the lane keep assist system. Now, I drove this vehicle for a few miles. It annoyed me. I turned it off and left it off most of the week. You do have an alert little light that you get there in the TAC whenever you have it turned off, but thankfully it does remember that for each key cycle, so you don't have to keep turning it off every time you get into the car. But I just got used to having that orange warning light there. I wish I didn't have to look at that light, but you know, I got used to it, and that was more preferable to me than having the car constantly steering for me, because unless you're a terrible driver and you fully admit that and you want every bit of hand holding and help that you can get, you know, if you're one of those very few people that actually would appreciate that hand holding, then this is great. But unless you're a student driver or something, most people, even terrible drivers, usually think they're great drivers and don't want anything messing with their driving. And this, it's like all the other systems adaptive cruise control that have lane keep assist. This does that, except on every single road you drive on, even if cruise control or anything like that isn't on. And so it works great whenever you do have the adaptive cruise control on and you are trying to do that. But whenever you're on roads where the road lines stop because of an intersection, or if you're not perfectly driving down the middle of your lane, it's constantly nudging at the steering wheel and constantly trying to get you to, you know, shift around and stuff. I think it's super annoying, honestly. And again, definitely make sure you can live with a warning light EyeSight constantly on in the tack, because if you can't, I think if I had to drive around with this lane keep assist on constantly, it would be a deal breaker. It would drive me insane. I think it definitely has promise, but right now it is not there yet. You know, maybe an older demographic would enjoy it, or people who aren't enthusiasts, I don't know. But personally, I just think that the system is way too overreaching currently. Thankfully though, this one was a little more well behaved than the system I had in the Legacy, which is identical. But in the Legacy, there were several times where it even got freaked out as far as, you know, getting ready to trigger the automatic emergency braking, even though the car in front of me was accelerating, not braking. The vehicle still, you know, would freak out here and, you know, get a little nervous in the Legacy. This, I didn't have any of those issues. Also, an important thing to note, you know, this has the driver monitoring system that I mentioned also in the Legacy. In this, it worked every time. It was flawless. In the Legacy, there was many times where it told me to keep my eyes on the road, even when I was staring straight ahead, and it wasn't very good with that. This car, I had no issues with that system. So maybe it varies depending on the conditions more, or based on what kind of actual vehicle you're in. Maybe it's just a luck of the draw. Some of them are more well calibrated than others. I'm not sure, but all I know is that this one did not scold me for not keeping my eyes on the road enough. Even whenever I wasn't looking away, I was just looking forward. So this one does that a little bit better, but I still don't trust that either because of the issues I had in the Legacy. So unfortunately, all this stuff is standard for the most part. Now you still have to pay for blind spot monitoring and a couple other little things, which are the things I actually wish were standard. Instead of, you know, forcing all this lane keep assist stuff on people as standard, I wish they had an option to not have that, because especially since it's in its infancy, it is not perfect, and not everyone's going to want to be dealing with your car constantly scolding you and having constant dings. I mean, every single time that it loses track of the lanes because of an intersection or something, it'll ding and give you a heads-up display alert telling you, it lost track of the lanes. And unless you don't mind having constant dings, it's going to get on your nerves, I think, for just about everyone. So that's my little rant there on the EyeSight system. Other things, though, to mention, it's a very nice vehicle to live with and drive. You know, it drives very much like a higher Legacy in many ways, which means it has a more car-like ride than a lot of the other SUVs, even though most of those are unibody these days and, you know, very smooth and car-like as well. This just has a little bit of extra polish and refinement to it, and it is a remarkably smooth ride, and I think it's probably right at the top of the class as far as ride smoothness and refinement goes. As far as ride quality, you don't get much wind noise, all that type of stuff is very good. The only thing that isn't refined about this whole experience is this engine. Now, it just seems to be these newer boxer engines. It doesn't matter. Also, the non-turbo Legacy had these similar issues where, first off, the auto stop start system is very abrupt, and if you're actually, you know, accelerating and you're resuming, it's fine. But whenever you're sitting at a stoplight or something and you're sitting there for a while, it'll only actually turn the car off for about 15 seconds or so, and then it kicks back on even if the HVAC system isn't on. So I'm not sure why it can't turn off for longer, but because of that, you kind of miss out on some of the potential gas savings you could have. But whenever it does kick back on, it is such a rough and abrupt kick on that the whole car shakes violently whenever it kicks back on. And if I wasn't holding the brake down hard enough, I honestly feel like the car would actually inch up a little bit because of just how rough the restart is on the auto stop start. Again, that's only if you are still staying stopped. If you're getting up and moving anyway from a red light or something to a green light, then it's a lot smoother. But if you're still wanting to stay put, that stop start system is really abrupt and could use some polish. It's also a very noisy engine, and I noticed, especially cold starts in the morning, pulling away, there's lots of whining, and it just, I think it's a transmission whine that I'm hearing. And then there's other little things, and there's a lot more mechanical noises that you hear in this versus a lot of the competitors that are a lot more polished in that regard as well. So the engine just feels a little rough at times, things like that you don't encounter with the competition. So another little refinement thing to note. Another thing, unfortunately, that I'm also slightly disappointed about is the fuel economy here in the Outback. So I did mostly city driving here in the Outback, and these are rated at 23 in the city, 30 on the highway, and 26 combined. And compared to the old flat six-cylinder engine that you had in the previous 3.6R versions of the Outback, those got 3 mpg less in every metric. So this is an improvement over that while having even more power than those do. So from an engineering standpoint, it's an improvement. But as far as real-world fuel economy goes here, in my now 120 miles of driving, which was mostly city and backroads driving, very little highway driving, but I did do a little bit. But I only managed to get 18.3 mpg. So I'm a full 5 mpg under this city rating. And the city rating should be about as bad as you're going to get generally. Now, in my testing on these types of roads with other vehicles that I have for a week, I generally see maybe 2 mpg less than the city rating at worst. And the Legacy also underperformed a little bit in my last week's test, and that was about 3 mpg less than the city. But this is like a full 5 less. And so that's kind of disappointing, honestly. I mean, I get that, you know, turbo motors in the real world are sometimes less fuel efficient than larger cylinder engines because you got that turbo spooling up and it's sucking down a lot more gas. So if you were very ginger on this engine and you were very careful with your throttle inputs, maybe you could eke out those numbers. And I'm sure highway, it should probably live up to your expectations if you're just coasting on the highway. But in stop and go driving, yeah, I think you're going to be struggling to get 20 miles per gallon in this vehicle, which is also a bummer. I think part of it is just the way the CVT is calibrated too, because even like Nissan, their older CVTs were horrible and all over the place. There goes the EyeSight system again. But it was all over the place. But with the Nissan CVTs that they've had in the most recent brand new stuff, they've really improved the CVT so that it doesn't rev up very quickly and it doesn't freewheel a lot. This CVT is still one of those older fashioned style CVTs in its tuning. Just trying to maintain speed sometimes, I just want 5 more mpg and it springs up to 3,000 RPMs on me. And even whenever I was trying to film the rolling shots that you're seeing, even just trying to keep pace with that camera car, I'm constantly like revving to 3,000 RPMs and then back down and then back up and back down. It's constantly doing this back and forth whenever more intelligently programmed transmissions just keep you at a middle ground there, rely on the torque from those turbos, and then give you that same performance. This is just like, just killing this engine for no reason. And it's like a turbo's efficiency isn't usually in those higher RPMs, it's the lower RPM punch, and this vehicle just does not have that low RPM punch, and instead I'm going to 4,500 RPMs just to go up a hill. And you shouldn't have that. When you got 277 pound-feet of torque, you don't need to do that. So I think this CVT just is not programmed well to take advantage of this turbo and you know, what kind of driving people actually want to do to get that good fuel efficiency. So can't say I'm impressed by the fuel economy either, just kind of a lot of disappointments here in the Outback. One thing though that I do have to say about the Outback is that there's basically zero competition, and Subaru managed to make a vehicle that is not only competitive but very wildly successful in this segment that no one else can crack. Buick tried with the Regal Tourex. It was on the market for 2 years and now they've pulled it and it's not going to be around here after 2020. And you know, you have basically the only other options are the more expensive stuff. You have your Volvos and your Audis, you know, the all-road and the Volvo, you know, cross-country versions of those. But those are all, even the Audi's a little cheaper than the Volvo, but even the Audi, you're $5,000 over the base price of an A4 all-road is $5,000 over the maxed out price of this Outback Touring, which is $40,720 to be exact, including destination for this one. And an A4 all-road is going to run you $45,000 with no options. And the way European manufacturers go, you have to get options because it's just, you know, those options lists are a mile long and they don't give you anything for free. So that's kind of, you know, where you're at as far as competitors go. There's really not much else. And if you're interested in a normal SUV, Subaru has the Forester, which is going to have a much larger cargo area in the back because it's a more square shape. And so, you know, the Forester more accurately compares to all the normal mid-sized SUVs and compact SUVs, so I don't think this really compares with those a whole lot. And so the Outback's still kind of in a class of its own, even after all these years, and even though this is their best-selling model, no one else has been able to duplicate their success with this kind of stuff. So I do respect them. I think I'm just not the target demographic. You know, they said it's an older demographic they're going for with these, and I think for those who want that comfort-oriented ride and, you know, aren't looking for the best performance, you know, this is just really just the more powerful engine option. It's not supposed to be sporty, it's not supposed to do any of that kind of stuff, but I wish that they would just calibrate things, because even from a comfort standpoint, and even looking through this with the goggles of an older demographic, I don't I don't want all this roughness. I don't want a rough start-stop system. I don't want it constantly scolding me. I don't want all these bells and whistles going off and having, you know, this massive screen can be a little confusing and distracting. It also is a little slow. There was one point where it actually just froze on me and wouldn't respond until I turned the car off, so it actually crashed basically. And so there's a lot of bugs here in this Outback, and maybe it's just because this is the first model year of this generation. I'm hoping it'll get better with time, but as of right now, a lot of the stuff in the Outback here feels a little half-baked to me and feels like it could use some improvements still. If you're in the market for a lifted wagon, this is still basically the only game in town, so if you're someone who has a current Outback and you just want a newer one, this is going to be a massive improvement, especially with this interior, which you can go watch that video still if you're curious on that. But as far as the driving stuff goes, I don't know if it's a massive improvement. Handling has certainly improved, and some of those other things are a little bit better. I like the turbo motor. I just think with some calibration changes to all these things, it could be really good. But as of right now, I'm not in love with the new Outback. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on the new Outback here in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. Thanks to Subaru for providing me with this Outback here to review for you guys today. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.